Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. This is Victoria with Meier Supply, and we're going to get the training started. So today's objective is to see hands-on how the Carmel Load Calc app works and how easy it really is to run a Manual J. Carmel is an ACCA-approved HVAC cooling and heating load calculation app for iPads. It performs peak cooling and heating load calcs per ACCA Manual J8 for both residential and light commercial buildings. HVAC equipment that is too small or too large for a home won't run very efficiently. So that's why, this is so important. The units that are too small won't be able to keep up with the extreme temperatures, that we have here in the Northeast. And ones that are too large will just run in short cycles, which reduce the system life, the homeowner's comfort, and it eats up energy consumption. So in the summer, your home will be more humid, and in the winter, some rooms can be chillier than others. The Manual J calculation helps you learn where your home has weaknesses in its energy efficiency. So it'll give you a clear idea, where you need to seal leaks, insulation, and provide a system that's going to be efficient for your homeowner. So as most of you know, the Manual J load calc is one of the requirements for the Clean Heat program here in New York State. And there's such a huge opportunity with the rebates in New York, which Anna's going to elaborate a little bit on. Anna Tarecki is the residential sales manager for the Northeast Business Unit, and she's our go-to person within Mitsubishi Electric. So she's going to touch base on the New York Clean Heat rebates that are available for Mitsubishi Electric. And then Stephen, who is president of Carmel Software. He's a developer of mobile software for the HVAC industry and also a designer of custom software for organizations such as Carrier, Honeywell, ASHRAE, the U.S. Department of Energy. He's extensively involved with a number of ASHRAE technical and standards committees. He's going to get us started with a live demonstration on how it works. So Anna.
Thanks, Victoria. Thank you. Thanks for including me in this today. Just a few quick words on the on why this is, load calc software has become increasingly important, particularly in New York State. As Victoria mentioned, I'm the residential sales manager for New York State, and we have in the past had NYSERDA rebates, but on April 1st, the Clean Heat program was revamped, and it went from being a $500 per unit rebate to a whole home rebate as well as a partial load rebate, and it was also transferred from NYSERDA to the utilities. One of the requirements for the new rebates is that on every job, both full load as well as partial load jobs, a load calculation must be submitted. And the great thing about that is that we know that then you as the contractor are putting in the right size equipment for the home. And in addition to the requirement of the load calculation, there is also a Diamond System Builder calculation that needs to be submitted. And all of this can gain a consumer $1,000 per 10,000 BTUs of heat at 5 degrees. So no longer is it a $500 per unit rebate. Instead, say, for example, if you're looking at our 8C48 or our 48,000 BTU multi-zone unit, that has 54,000 BTUs of heat at 5 degrees. So that rebate has gone from $500 to $5,400 total rebate. You as the contractor get to keep 500 of it, and the consumer gets 4,900 of it. So there is a substantial amount of money to be gained for the consumer or your customer, as well as being able to provide them with the correct equipment in their home. So this is almost a requirement now for any job that you're going to sell in New York State when it comes to ductless. So it's great that you've joined us and that you're being a part of this training session. If you have any additional questions about the Clean Heat program, you can contact your territory manager at Meier Supply, Victoria, or myself or any of the area sales managers at Mitsubishi Electric to help walk you through the program. So first, let me thank you, Meier Supply, for hosting this as well. This is a great training and something that's definitely needed in the marketplace. So thank you for being a great partner to all the contractors and to us at Mitsubishi Electric. Thanks, Victoria.
Yeah, thanks, Lana. So now I'm going to hand it over to Stephen. He's going to do a live demonstration. I believe you guys are all going to be unmuted. So if you could keep, you're going to be unmuted from our side of it. So if you can self-mute your microphones, if you have questions, there's the chat box, or, you can unmute to ask, but trying to eliminate any background noise possible. So Stephen, it's all yours.
All right, Victoria, thank you so much. And also thank you to Meier Supply for hosting this today. So as Victoria mentioned, I am going to unmute everyone right now. It looks like a lot of you are self-muted, but if you are not, please do self-mute yourself while I am talking so we can avoid background noise. However, I do want to make this interactive. So if you do have a question, please unmute yourself, ask your question, and then remute. So I am going to unmute all attendees, and great. It looks like all of you are self-muted, which is great. Actually, a couple of you aren't. But if I do start hearing background noise, I will need to mute everyone again, just because based on experience, it is quite, it can get a bit annoying. So before I do start the webinar, I do want to take a quick poll. And so I'm going to launch a poll right now. And the question is, do you currently use some type of HVAC load calculation software tool? Yes or no? Okay, looks like we're done. So I will close that poll, and it looks like, let me see if I can display that here. It doesn't look like I actually share it. Let's see, there we go. All right, so 78% of you said yes, you do use a software tool, and 22% no. So that's about what I thought. Usually it's around 80 to 90% of the people who attend our webinars have used a software tool in the past, and 20%, still use either rule of thumb or pad of paper and pencil. But I'm going to show you that using a software tool really does help not only speed up the process, but allow you to make a more accurate load calculation so you can properly size your equipment. And as Victoria was saying, it's really important that the equipment be properly sized, because you don't want to oversize it, because it'll, it will overcool or it will short cycle. If you undersize, you're going to have an unhappy homeowner, and you definitely don't want that. So it's really important that you do properly size it, and using software such as ours can help you do that. So I'm going to share my screen now. Bear with me while I All right, you should be able to see my screen now. All right, so what you are looking at is what's called an emulator on my MacBook. And an emulator is a great tool. It not only allows us to test the software prior to actually launching it on the iPad, but it also allows us to do webinars and demos, just like what I'm doing today. So what you see here is exactly what you would see on the iPad. It allows me, as I mentioned, to train you. And so what I'm going to do today is I am going to, show you all the features and benefits of this application. And as I mentioned, I like this to be interactive. So if you do have a question, please unmute yourself, ask the question while I'm talking, and then remute. You can also ask questions in the little applet. There's a question applet, which keeps track of all the questions and answers. So feel free to do either way, and I'll make sure to look at, the question applet and answer those questions too. So let's get started. So as I mentioned, this is an emulator. So what you see here is exactly what you would see on the iPad. And you can use the emulator in either landscape mode, which is what we're looking at now, or portrait mode. And all the inputs are the same. It's just the way they're laid out. And I think most people actually use it in landscape mode because it's laid out where you can see actually more information. So the way the app works is on the left here, you actually create a project. Now, a project is usually a whole home, okay? And, based upon what you select here, and then on the right are the inputs for that project. Now, with the plus button, you can either create a new project or you can copy from an existing project. So this is a thing called templates, which some of you may be familiar with if you use, say, Train Trace or other load calc tools. You can create a template which you can copy over and over again. So it really helps reduce re-entering data over and over. So if you happen to be performing HVAC load calcs on similar type homes in a neighborhood, townhouses, whatever, you can create one and then copy it to the new one and then edit the data for the new one. So it really helps reduce the manual data entry, which is really the goal of these software tools. So, and before actually I continue, I want to make sure that you do understand this is an ACCA approved HVAC load calculation tool, and it performs peak cooling and heating loads, meaning that you can size your HVAC equipment based upon the results of this software tool. And also it is approved by ACCA. It's been approved since 2012, so 8 years now. And what that means is that the reports produced from this app can be presented to your local municipality, and then you can get a permit and do a change out or whatever. So it's really advantageous to be using an app that is approved by ACCA. We had to go through a rigorous 6-month process to get approved. And as I mentioned, this was done back in 2012. So it's been out for about 8 years now. And we have literally thousands of users throughout the nation using this app. So there's actually 2 modes to this app. There's what's called the block load mode, which you see up here, or the room by room mode. So the block load mode helps you think of the house or your small building as one block. So you don't care about the rooms at this point. It's one block. So you look at all the outside walls, you look at internal loads and other information. And then this is the way you size your HVAC equipment based upon the block load. However, you eventually want to get more granular, meaning that you want to get more detailed. So you want to start sizing for each room. And the reason you want to do that is you want to start sizing the ductwork for each room, and you also want to know the loads for each room. So we start out with the block load. You look at the house as one block and you define all of the windows and doors and roofs and floors, etc. And then after you're done specifying all that information, and then you go into the room by room and start entering the information for rooms. Now, some of you may just want to do a block load because all you want to do is size the equipment, and that's all you want to do. You don't care about the individual rooms at this time. That's fine. All you need to do is that block load, and that saves you a lot of time. There's other tools out there that you actually start with the room by room and then get a block load. But because this is a field-based tool, this is a tool that you're going to use out in the field the majority of the time. We feel that, you don't want to be spending 2 hours using this app out in the field. You want to do it, say, within a half hour. So that you can do that, in the block load mode. And I'm going to show you that right now. So as I mentioned before, you can create a new project or you can select an existing project. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to work with an existing project and show you all of the inputs and, information about all the inputs. So I'm going to demo for you the Ross Residence, which is a sample project. And on the right here are inputs associated with, or project inputs associated with Ross Residence. And here we have basic project inputs. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every single input because it would literally take us 2 to 3 hours. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview of some of the more important inputs in each of these sections. So you enter your basic demographic information. But the nice thing is here is you click this little caret icon and up pops the weather data form. And obviously specifying weather data is important because a home in Alaska is going to be conditioned a lot differently than a home in southern Florida. So it's important that you get the correct weather data. So obviously, let me go ahead, since we're dealing with the state of New York, Let me select New York. There we go. And then on the right here are a bunch of cities in New York State, and I'll select, why do I select Binghamton? So here you'll see various weather and latitude information, elevation, peak summer dry bulb, peak or the coincidental wet bulb, and also winter dry bulb. And then you can also do what's called a map it feature. And what this does is this calls up Google Maps and actually maps all of the weather data that we have in our database, and they're represented by these push pins. So you can actually select the push pin, and it will then select the correct weather data. So in that case, it selected Ithaca, New York. I'll click done. So now the weather data is assigned to this particular project. Also, if you don't quite agree with this data, you can always go in here and edit this data. So you can actually change that data if you want, from say 88 to 90 if you want. All right, so down here is information about our home in general. So here I would enter my total floor area. So a common theme throughout this app is there's a couple of different ways to enter data. You can either, obviously I'm using a mouse since I'm using, I'm on the emulator on my MacBook, but in your case, you use your finger on the iPad. You can, put your finger in the input and change the input. So in this case, if I want to change it to 2600, click done, I can do that. Another way to do it is you have this slider control. So as you can see that as I'm moving my slider, it changes the values, decreases or increases. And what's nice also is that it automatically updates my loads, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. Another thing you'll see too is that this slider is moving in tandem with the slider below it. And the reason is most of the time you're going to heat and cool the same square area of your home. And you'll see that this number is a maroon number, meaning that it is a derived or a calculated number. In other words, it's based upon another number. So in this case, this number is 3,300 is based upon this number here. However, I can override this. So suppose I heat a different square footage and I cool in my home. I'll add 3,000, click done, and now you'll see that the numbers are different. They're no longer in tandem. So I can indeed override that. If I want them to be in tandem again, just delete the number, click done, and they'll be in tandem. And this is a common theme throughout the app. You'll see that there are various maroon numbers, and that means that they're calculated, but they can be overridden. All right, so now that I've entered my total area, I can enter an average room height throughout the whole home. And what this really does is this number is multiplied by my total floor area to calculate the volume of my home. And the reason we want to know the volume or the cubic footage of my home is for purposes of calculating both infiltration and ventilation loads, which I'll show you in a bit. Here we enter the number of bedrooms, and based upon the number of bedrooms, it actually calculates the number of occupants. So as you can see, if I increase the number of bedrooms, it increases the occupants. All it does is add one. And occupant load is important because, especially if you have a large number of people contribute not only sensible loads to the space, but also latent loads. Then down here is our appliance list. So I do want to go into a little bit of detail on this. So low, medium, high means, I have about 1,200 BTU of appliances, meaning, stovetop or refrigerator, computers, TV, audiovisual, AV systems, whatever. So you can either select low, medium, high, but you also can do custom. And what custom allows you to do is actually add a customized list of appliances you have throughout your whole home. So here's a list that comes from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook. So here, let's say dishwasher, and I have one, and this is the sensible and latent loads that the dishwasher contributes to my home. Now, it doesn't contribute 100% of the time. It only contributes 25% of the time, say. So then it multiplies these numbers together and provides us the average sensible and latent load for a dishwasher. So let me add another item here. Let's add a television. So let's say we have 3 televisions in our home. So here there's only a sensible component to our television. This is our total load for television. All right, let me just do one more. Obviously, most homes will have more than this, but just for the sake of time, I don't want to take up too much time on computers. So, you know, these days people have a lot of computers, iPads. Let's say we have 5 computers and iPads. And here's my total load due to computers. So here are all my appliances. I click done and it adds them all up, and this is my total appliance load. Now later on in the room by room, you'll see that I'll be able to actually assign these individual appliances to different rooms. All right, so on the right here is a pie chart showing a breakdown of my cooling load. And these are the window, envelope, infiltration, etc. Different total cooling load breakdown. And here's my total cooling load, and here's my airflow. Same thing with heating. And if you see that maybe it's only one color for this pie chart, just click the little calculator icon and it recalculates. And then we have what's called the AED curve. Now this was a requirement to get ACCA approved. And what this stands for is adequate excursion diversity. I think that's what it stands for. But basically what it means is how diverse is my load throughout the home. So what this means is if my peak load here, and it's actually showing my load profile throughout the day, starting at 8 a.m. all the way to 8 p.m. And as you can see, my load increases obviously throughout the day until it peaks around, say, 1:30 or 2 p.m. and then starts decreasing. Now, if this peak is greater than this line here, the limit line, that's telling me that I probably need a VAV system in this home because it's not adequately diversified, the load. So most likely you want to install a VAV. If this peak is below this limit line, then you're okay with a constant volume system. So that's what this curve means. And we'll also see this curve for the individual rooms. But really for the whole home, we're looking at this, and ACCA is suggesting that we have a VAV system, so you would select it here, multi-zone VAV. Now, does that affect your load? No, but it will affect your equipment selection, obviously. All right, I see a question here, so I'm going to actually address this question. And do we have to put in windows and doors? Yes, and I have not gotten to that yet. I am actually going to get to that in about 30 seconds. All right, so here we have our general input loads, project loads. I'm going to swipe now. So you can see by the 3 dots below here that you can swipe from screen to screen because there's a number of inputs, so we obviously can't fit them all on one screen. So here we have set points. So I can change my set point by sliding the slider control. And as you can see, when I change my cooling set point, it obviously affects my cooling load. And then as I change my heating set point, it changes my heating load. I can enter my indoor relative humidity. I can also enter my coil temperature in terms of the air coming off the cooling coil and then the air coming off the heating coil. Now this cooling coil temperature will actually affect my airflow because the airflow is calculated based upon not only the total cooling load, but also the difference in temperature between your set point and your coil temperature. Now down here, we can select, what is the tightness of my home? Is it a new construction? It'll be tight. If it's, maybe 10, 15, 20 years old, average construction. And then if it's an old home that has not been renovated in a while, you want to select loose construction. And that will affect actually my infiltration. So let's look at infiltration here. So infiltration is air coming in through, your windows, your doors, any leakage. So there's 3 different methods that you can calculate infiltration. I am not going to go through all 3. Like I said, we don't have time to go through it all, but I'm going to talk about this first method called the Manual J air change method. And basically what you do is you select what type of home I have. It already pre-selected my construction tightness and automatically calculates the number of air changes per hour of infiltration, cooling infiltration, into my home based upon these selections. So if I want, actually, let me go back and let's do an average tightness. So we'll lower my infiltration, and as you can see, it lowered it. And I can also do heating. Now, heating is similar. The only difference is you also need to add in your fireplace because obviously in the winter, you may have some drafts from your chimney. So you do need to enter the number of fireplaces in the home and also the tightness of the fireplace. All right, let's talk about ventilation. So ventilation can either be automatically calculated. So if I say calc vent rate, you'll see that it's a maroon number, meaning it's automatically calculated. This is my CFM of ventilation, and here's my load for ventilation. So it's about 1/3 of a ton. Now I can manually override that, click this, and then I can go in here and say, you know what, I only have, say, I don't know, 20 CFM of ventilation. So then here you'll see that it will reduce my ventilation load pretty dramatically. So either or, and now ventilation is calculated based upon the ACCA Manual J8 formulas, and there's a number of factors that goes into calculating ventilation. So not only the volume of your home, but also the infiltration. Because if you think about it, if you have infiltration coming in, but you also have ventilation, there's going to be a little bit of, positive, negative pressure issues going on, and also exhaust too. So all these values are taken into account when calculating your ventilation rate. All right, so let's talk about duct. So this is not a manual D application, it's a manual J app, but it is important to approximate the layout of your duct system here, because especially leaky duct systems can leak a lot of heat and a lot of cooling, and as a result, add a lot to your cooling and heating load. So you can add actually as many as 5 duct systems to your home, and then I'll select this one, and you can model your supply and your return if you happen to have one. So here we have our supply, and then here's a bunch of parameters for our supply duct. And I'll go through some of these quickly. Duct location, where is it located? What type of duct system? Radial, trunk and branch. What's the configuration? Single, 2-story. The ceiling type. So in this case, because the duct is located above the attic, I want to know the ceiling type. And these number letter combinations are actually ceiling types from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook, which I can show you under the envelope section in a bit. What's the R value of the duct insulation? And then the duct leakage. And this is a really important one. The better it's sealed and tested, obviously the lower the leakage and the lower the load. So I want to show you real quickly what a difference it makes. So here you can see, if I close this real quickly, you'll see that my duct heat loss is about 6,400. It includes blower heat gain, but that's minimal. So let me go back in here and let me change this to a leaky duct system. And you'll see that an unsealed duct system, and you'll see that it pretty much doubles my duct load. So it's really important that you get this correct, because it could dramatically affect your total cooling load and also your heating load. All right, and then the duct surface area, it can be automatically calculated. Most of the time, what ACCA suggests is that it's calculated based upon, actually, let me display the keyboard again. Bear with me for a second. It's not displaying it. Okay. Anyway, so if I erase it, it will automatically calculate the duct surface area based upon the floor area, which is around 20, I think about 20%. Yeah. Let me try that again. Got the keyboard showing it doesn't calculate it. Okay. I'll just override it with around, say, 600. And let me go back to a sealed duct system, since that will lower our load to more realistic. Okay, so as I mentioned, it's important that you get the inputs correct for your duct system for both cooling and heating, and also for both your supply and return if you happen to have one. All right, so I'm going to swipe one more time, and here, and this is a common theme throughout the app, you can see a really detailed breakdown of your cooling and heating load, and this shows you not only the values but also the percentages. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about envelope. So we're still under the block load. So we're treating our home as one big block. So in terms of envelope, we want to define anything where heat is transferred across. So in other words, we want to define all our outdoor walls. We want to define all of our ceilings and roofs, any partitions internally. So partitions meaning a wall that's adjacent to our garage or an unheated space. Also any doors and floors. Floors above an unconditioned basement, or even floors that are on slab or on grate. So here I predefined a bunch of envelopes. Oh yeah, one more thing too. And I get this question literally every week. Do I need to model my wall, my internal walls, say walls that are between my living room and my dining room. No, you do not. You can totally ignore those walls. The reason is because there's no heat transfer across those walls. Most of the time, you're going to have the same cooling set point in your living room as you will have in your dining room. So there's no need to model that wall. You can totally ignore that wall. It adds nothing to the loads. And like I said, I literally get that question weekly. So make sure that you don't have to worry about internal walls other than partitions. We're just concerned with walls where the heat is transferring across it, such as outdoor walls. So let's talk about an outdoor wall. Here we have our west wall, okay? And actually, let me change this to above grade wall. So that means it's an outdoor wall. And here's the orientation. Let's actually change that to west. And the construction number. So this database of construction types comes from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook. And there's a lot, there's literally hundreds of constructions, not only for walls, but roofs, floors, doors, etc. So here are the construction categories. We have a frame wall, block wall, or alternative wall. So on our frame wall, we can scroll through the list here, and you'll see as I scroll through it, it displays the U values and also a description. And if I click done, it will automatically fill in my U value, which is maroon as you can see, but I can also override it. And it will also fill in my what's called my cooling load temperature difference group, which is kind of a nomenclature that comes from ACCA Manual J8 handbook. And most of the time, you don't really need to touch this. It really just affects your solar load on that wall. And then below that, you can enter your wall width and your wall height, and it will multiply these two values to get your total area. And I see I have another question. Oh, do we offer software for PC? No, we don't. We used to probably 15 years ago, but we are solely focused on mobile. There are other competitors out there that offer desktop software that do a good job on the desktop. Our forte is mobile because we want people using our apps out in the field, which is exactly what our niche is. So no, we do not offer PC. However, one thing that's new, you may have heard from Apple, is they are actually making most iOS, meaning mobile apps, available on the next version of Mac. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, but if it does work the way I think it does, all our apps will be available on the Mac to be used on the Mac, almost as kind of similar to the way you're seeing my app right now. It'll be available in an emulator. So that should be interesting. So if you do have a Mac, our apps will be available for purchase on the Mac, but I think that's not going to be for probably till next year. All right, so let's continue. So we defined our west wall, and here, let's change this to south wall, and here's our south wall, and then east wall, and then our north wall. So these are our different walls. All right, let's talk about ceiling. So, you know, as you can see here, we have different types of envelopes. We have our wood metal door above grade wall, which we just talked about. We have a basement wall, which is below grade, which is mainly used for heating loads. A partition wall, which I briefly mentioned, which would be an internal wall that's adjacent to your garage. So there is heat loss across that wall. There's a ceiling envelope type, a partition ceiling, and then floor. So let's look at ceiling. So when we look at ceiling, and then we want to know the direction. So if we have, say, a gable roof, you know, we may have two ceilings, one that's facing east and one that's facing west. So let's say our gable ceiling or roof is facing west, then these are the construction types for our ceiling or roof. So we either have an under attic ceiling or roof deck or roof joists. So these are all the different construction types you can select for our roof / ceilings. Automatically fills in my U value. I enter my ceiling length and width, and also the slope of that ceiling if it's a gable roof. So this nomenclature comes from ACCA, but it's a little deceiving. When we say ceiling and partition ceiling, we're actually not only talking about ceiling, we're talking about roof. Because, you know, suppose we have a ceiling below an attic that's unconditioned. Well, that would be obviously an internal ceiling. Or we may have just, you know, direct to a roof. There's no attic above our, say, our living room. That would be the roof. But in terms of nomenclature, ceiling and roof are used interchangeably. All right, let's talk about door. So here we can select our wood metal door. We can specify where that door is attached. So we defined a bunch of walls already, and we want to specify the wall that this door is attached to. And the reason we want to do that is it will subtract out the area of the wall from, or subtract out the area of the door from the wall. Here's a couple of different construction types for doors that come from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook. Then we fill in the door width and height, the total area, and here's our total load here. Look at partition. So a partition wall, as I mentioned, is an internal wall, but it's adjacent to, say, garage. So we have the same database of wall types, and we can enter our wall width and height. And then here we would enter the temperature on the other side of the partition. So if, say, in the summer, our garage gets up to 95, we'd enter it here. In the winter, it gets down to 45, we enter it here. All right, and then once again, you have that same screen I showed you before where you can look at the detailed breakdown of your loads. All right, so let's move on. We have about 20 minutes left, and there's a fair amount to cover. And so I do want to make sure to cover the important points. We do have a couple more questions. Is the software available for Android? Yeah, we get this asked all the time. So we do have software for the Android, but we don't have a load calc software tool. We are working on one. It's just, takes time to do it. So we are working on one, but it's not available yet. All right, let's talk about Windows. So Windows, as you can see here, I have created a whole list of windows here. I can add new windows if I want. I can also copy from existing windows. And I could have done the same thing also for envelopes. I forgot to mention that. You can create new envelopes by clicking the plus button. You can copy also from existing. So if you suppose you have, 4 walls that are exactly the same, the only difference is they're in different orientations, north, south, east, west. Well, you can copy that west wall and then create a new one, just change the orientation and you're set. So it really eliminates all that duplicate manual entry of data. So let's talk about windows. So here we have a west-facing window. Here we would select which wall is my window attached to. And the reason is twofold. We want to know this. One is we want to know the direction of this window, since that's very important. And we also want to subtract out the area of the window from the wall. Construction numbers. So these come from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook. You can have single, double, or triple pane windows. And then the frame around the window, you have 4 different options here. Based upon this combination of inputs, it automatically calculates our U value and what's called our solar heat gain coefficient value, which deals with solar load. What type of window is it? If you're not sure, just enter default, or it could be bay window or garden window. Here I can enter the area. Suppose I have, multiple windows, say, 2 of the same area window. I can enter the area of 1 of the windows and enter quantity 2. All this does is just multiplies these 2 numbers together. So if you have windows of different sizes, just enter the total area here and enter a value of 1 here. All we're looking at is the total area of windows. So the rest of the inputs deal with shading. Obviously, shading is very important because for Windows, because it can drastically reduce your solar load, as a result, reducing your cooling load. So here we talk about internal shading, and we can select blinds, shades, or drapes. And then we can specify the percentage of window it covers. And we can select either an insect screen, whether it's internal or external. Down here we have a sunscreen. You can have different options for our sunscreen. And then here we have external shading. And this means, do we have an overhang above our window? And if so, you enter the geometry of that overhang. It calculates all the geometric formulas, and it will calculate how much shading that overhang is providing over that window. So here we have all our window inputs, and then down here we can see what this window is contributing in terms of cooling and heating load. And then once again, if we swipe, we see our breakdown. All right, so let's move on to Skylight. So Skylight's pretty simple. Once again, you can add as many skylights as you want. Here I just have 1 skylight. It's in my kitchen. I assign it to the ceiling, which I defined under my envelope. And then I can select the construction type for my skylight, single, double, or triple pane. What type of curved construction does my skylight have? Based upon these 2 inputs, it will automatically fill in my U value and my solar heat gain coefficient. I enter the area of, one skylight if I have one. If I have multiple ones, I can enter the quantity here, and then it will calculate my skylight load. So based upon all of these inputs that I've just entered, meaning my project, my envelope inputs, my window, and my skylight inputs, I now have a block load. My block load is this value here, 52,000 BTU per hour, which is around 4.5 tons. And then here's my airflow. My heating load, about 101,000. And here's my AED curve. Now you can see that my AED curve changed a little bit, probably based upon the changes I made when I was demoing this. And now my peak is below this limit line. So now I could probably get away with a constant volume system in this home because my load is not varying as much as it was before. So this AED curve is actually really useful because it really does show you a quick load profile of how my load changes. And most of the time it's going to peak in the early afternoon, but there's some instances where, say, most of your windows are facing east. Well, that means it's going to probably peak in the morning, since obviously the sun rises in the east. If most of your windows are in the south or west, it's going to peak more in the afternoon. All right, let's talk about reports. So this is obviously the important part. These reports are the way that you get all of these results out into the hands of, the municipalities or your clients or engineers or your resellers or whoever you need to get this information to. So here we have system reports, and these display on the screen, and you can swipe from right to left to display the different reports. So this is an overview, more demographic information, and also a summary profile. This is kind of a checksum values for cooling, checksum values for heating. Here's our block load breakdown, similar to what we saw on the screen before. Here's for heating. Here's our room by room load, which I'll show you in more detail in a little bit. Here's those pie charts, which we saw on the screen before, and for heating. Now you can choose to email all of these reports to anyone you want. You can also air print these reports to an air print enabled printer. And when you click this, I can't click it on my emulator because obviously the emulator doesn't email. But if I did have this on my iPad, I could click this. It would open my email client. It would actually attach a PDF to my email. And then you can type in the email address and it will send a PDF of all these reports to whoever you want. Go back, room reports. Let me show you this in a bit after I talk about the room by room. Email HTML report. Basically what this does is it opens your email client and attaches an HTML and also a spreadsheet report of all of this data. So of all the outputs. So it kind of allows you to create your own custom report. Email database, this is a feature that is used more for diagnostic purposes. So sometimes we get clients calling us saying, hey, my load doesn't make sense. And obviously it's hard to diagnose that over the phone. So they can actually email me their database and I can open it on my iPad and help them out with their issue. You can also do this on your own. If you want to email your project database to someone else who has an iPad app, has the iPad app, you can do that. The only issue is it will override all their projects. So that's the only issue with this. We are working on a version which will actually save this information to iCloud, meaning that you can actually share these projects with one another, but that will be down the road. And this is actually a new feature that is not even available on the App Store yet that we're going to release in about 2 weeks. And these are input reports, and we get constant requests for this. Before you saw all the outputs, but now we are actually creating reports for all of the inputs for what you've just entered. So in other words, every single input that you've entered so far will be displayed as a report. And like I said, we've had constant requests for this over the past couple of years, and finally this is made available. So these are all the inputs that you inputted, and we have them broken down by project, window, skylight. Obviously, we're missing envelope, which we haven't released or worked on yet. But this functionality will be available probably in about 3 to 4 weeks. All right. I see there's another question. Can this be used for manual S? Great question. So yeah, we get that question all the time. This is not an official Manual S app. Once again, we do need to get approved by ACCA to claim that it is Manual S. And Manual S, for those of you who may not know what it is equipment, basically equipment selection. So this does provide the proper values and results that are needed to select equipment. But the way ACCA approves you to become a Manual S app is you need to have it formatted in specific ways. So we have not done that yet. So this is not an official Manual S app. However, the results produced from this app do produce results that allow you to do equipment selection, meaning that you have your total load, cooling load, your total airflow, and you have your total heating load, you have your set points. That's a subset of some of the information required to select your equipment. So we are going to work on making this Manual S enabled, but once again, it is a time-intensive process, and also it does require us to be approved by ACCA for Manual S, which also takes 3 to 6 months. So that's down the road. All right, so it looks like we have about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about room by room. So I mentioned before block load. So now we determined we treated our home as one big block. We found our total cooling load and our total heating load. We are now able to size our equipment. And that's maybe all you need to do. And you can send the reports to your city, you can send the reports to your client, or to your reseller, or to Meier Supply, whoever, and they can spec out the equipment and you're done. But you can take it one step further, and now we can do a room by room. And in fact, we're getting more granular here, because what we want to do now is we want to see what the loads are, the cooling and heating loads are for each of our rooms. But we also, and maybe even more importantly, we want to determine the airflows for each room. Because if this is a retrofit of a home, or say even this is a new construction, we want to know, what size ductwork we want to run into each of these rooms. And based upon that, the airflow values we get, we can determine the size ductwork. So this is important for more granular analysis of our home. So, and once again, we get this question all the time. How come my total of my room by room load does not equal my block load? Well, it will never, ever equal your block load unless it's a total coincidence. Because if you think about it, rooms peak at different times of the day. So the sum of the peak loads is never going to equal your block load. Once again, if it does, it's a coincidence. So we get this question all the time. Why aren't they equal? Well, they should. If they are equal, they probably shouldn't be. Most of the time, the total of all your room loads will be greater than your block load, because we're totaling all of our peaks. Because if you think about it, a room facing east will peak in the morning. Meanwhile, a room facing west with west windows will peak in the afternoon. So those loads peak at different times in the day. All right, so I've already added a bunch of rooms just to save some time. You can add more rooms if you want. Click the plus button, enter your room name, or once again, you can copy from existing rooms. So if you have a couple bedrooms that are kind of similar on the same orientation, but they're different areas, you can copy those over without having to re-enter data over and over again. So here I have an office. I can assign the number of occupants. So if you remember, I had 6 occupants here. Well, I can start assigning occupants to my different rooms, and it just adds the sensible and latent load for that person. Then if you remember, I defined these appliance loads. So I had this appliance list here. Well, now I can start parsing out these appliances to the individual rooms. So in this case, let's look at, since this is an office, I'm going to say I have 1 computer here. And it's going to assign that computer load to this room. And then I can do that for the remaining rooms. All right, so here's my total cooling and heating load for the room so far. Let's talk about envelopes. So I can start adding my various ceiling, floor, and wall constructions that are assigned to this room. So let's look at the north. Let's look at the west wall for a second. So I've added this west wall. So what this input does here is it actually looks at everything I am under my block load, all the construction types that are under my block load. It lists them here and allows me to use it. So in other words, remember, under my block load envelope, I had this west wall. at around 440 square feet. When I go to my room by room, west wall, I am going to utilize that west wall here. And then I'm going to say, you know, of that 440 square feet, I have, let's say 120 square feet. And this is the amount remaining. So I'm using this west wall elsewhere in other rooms. So this basically, I'm using the constructions that I defined in my block load in the room by room, but I can still enter different areas for each room, obviously. All right, so I've already defined my ceiling and my floor. Let's talk about windows. Same thing with windows. I defined my windows in my block load. Now I can start using them in my individual room by room. So here I'm going to select my west-facing window that I defined in my block load. And let's say the window is 20 square feet. And here's the load for that window. In this case, there's no skylight in my office, so I just have windows and envelopes. So here's my total load. There's a load breakdown, my total load, and here's my airflow, 320 square feet. Heating, here's my total load. And here, if I click the calculator icon, it calculates my AED curve for this particular room. So you'll see that the load profile for my individual rooms can be a lot different than the load profile for my whole home. So you can see here, see how it looks like this. Meanwhile, for this room, it's totally different. You see that my load actually peaks later in the day, most likely because I have west windows. So you don't have to worry about this being above this limit line here, because really, you know, we're talking about an individual room. The only thing we're really concerned is when the curve is above it for the whole home. That's when you probably need a VUV system. All right, so we defined the office. Looks like we have a couple more minutes. So I will go through one more room here. Let's talk about the bedroom. And here we have one occupant, and let's say we have a TV in this room. Assign one TV, and it assigns the appliance load of that TV to this room. Here I have a south and west wall. Once again, I derive those constructions from the block load, and I assign the areas that are appropriate for this bedroom. Here are my windows, south and west window, and in this case, there's no skylight. So if you're, say, looking at the windows for a room and you're kind of confused, oh, wait, which room am I talking about here? Well, just look here. You can see it's my Ross residence bedroom 1. So the label, the room that you're working with is always displayed here. So if we go back here, we can look at our total load profile in terms of cooling, 350 CFM for this room, heating, and then our AED curve. And you'll see the load profile is a little different than even the office. All right, so just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but you get the idea. You can enter the properties of all these different rooms. You can add them. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to show you too is you can also delete stuff. People call us all the time. How do you delete a room? Or how do you delete a project? Well, all you need to do is swipe with your finger and click delete. Same thing with any of these lists. Just swipe with your finger and click delete. All right, so let's talk about the reports real quick. Here we have our room reports. So you can either display an individual report for each room, just like this, or you can display reports for all the rooms. You can also display the breakdown. If you remember from our system report, we had that one page where we saw a list of all our rooms here with the cooling, heating, and airflows. So this is a nice report here, nice concise report. And once again, you can email it, you can AirPrint, everything else. Let me talk about the I button real quick. The I button is just settings. Most of the time, you probably won't go in here, but one thing that confuses people is they think that these inputs here actually apply to your project. All these inputs are is just set max values for your slider control. So here you have 10,000. This is the max slider, 10,000. If you have a super big home, say 25,000 square feet or whatever, you can change this max slider value, change it to 30,000. All it does is just changes the max value for your slider. It in no way affects this project. Some people kind of get confused thinking that these are inputs for our project. No, these are just settings for the program. And then if you want to enter your company information to be displayed on reports, you can enter your information here. All right, so that is the software tool in a nutshell. And I have a couple more questions I want to address here. Looks like if the Manual S question was in regards to the New York State Clean Heat Program, the Mitsubishi Diamond System Builders now has an acceptable alternative to the Manual S requirement. Manual J is still required as well. So that was from Tony Meier. I think he was just providing an answer to that Manual S question. And then how about printing a cover sheet? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you look at the report here, I mean, this is kind of a cover sheet in a way. If you're talking about your own custom cover sheet, that's not available now, but it is an interesting idea, and maybe we'll add that to our input report. So that actually is a pretty good idea, but there's no way to create your own custom cover sheet right now. All right, are there any other questions at all? Oh, actually, someone did request email address. Let me bring up the browser real quickly here. And okay, so anyway, first of all, if you want to download this app, it is available obviously on the App Store. All you need to do is type in HVAC ResLoad-J into your iPad in the App Store icon, or just go to Carmel Software. You'll see all our apps. We literally have like 20 apps, and you'll see this one, HVAC ResLoad-J. So this is how you find it on the App Store. In terms of my email address, the easiest one, just sroth@carmelsoft.com. I'll spell that out. S as in Steve, R-O-T-H at CarmelSoft, same as our website, CarmelSoft.com. That's my that's my email. If you do have any further questions about the app, and we provide unlimited support. There's email support. There's also help within the app itself, and then we do have recordings of all our videos and previous training sessions, including this one, available. So are there any other questions for me or for anyone, or for Victoria or anyone else before we end this webinar? Oh, okay, here's another question. Can multiple users use the same email? For instance, one work email will allow multiple employees. I think what you may be asking is iTunes accounts. It depends. If you have multiple iPads and they're all on the same iTunes account, then you only have to download this app once and it will work on those multiple iPads. However, if you have different iTunes accounts on the different iPads, then you do need to download the app separately and pay for it separately. I think that's what that question is. Is that a one-time fee or unlimited? This is a one-time fee. There's no renewal each year. It's not yearly fee. It's one time, and all updates are free. Someone wants you to put the email on the screen. I will gladly do that. Let me do that real quickly. Hold on, bear with me for 1 second.
Hey, Stephen, while you're doing that,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for attending the webinar. And, if you have any questions, to absolutely reach out to myself, to your TM, to Stephen, we will all help you and get it all squared away. So
Let me know if you can see my, email address here. It's a bit small, but I typed it out, sroth@carmelsoft.com. Another question is, are updates automatic? Yes, they are. So once we update the app, assuming you have automatic download of any updates to all your iPad apps, yes, it will be automatic. If you don't have automatic update, you do need to proactively go ahead and update it. But the updates are available, like I said, for free when they are available, when they are released. Is this price, like as I mentioned before, this is a one-time fee. So there's no monthly fee, yearly fee. It's one time. That's it. All right. Any other questions? Victoria, did you want to say anything before we end the webinar?
Yeah, just thanks again, everybody. And we hope that you enjoyed this and you can see how simple it really is to use. So as always, reach out with any questions and have a great rest of your afternoon.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Meier Supply. Appreciate it.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.